The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of alien craftsmanship. A vast, translucent crystal dome suspended above a roaring red star. Beams of light danced across the chamber floor, reflecting off the robes, armor, and scales of hundreds of alien delegates. The air buzzed with quiet tension as General Elias Vance entered. Unlike the other attendees, who were adorned in the regalia of their species, Vance wore his Terran Defense Forces uniform, sharp, dark gray, with a single silver star on the collar. His boots struck the polished floor with purpose, each step echoing louder than the murmurs of the gathered crowd. Vance was no diplomat. He was a soldier, shaped by Earth's darkest hours. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to make them listen. The hum of conversation faded as he approached the Council's central podium. At its base, a holographic map of the Milky Way rotated slowly, highlighting territories controlled by the Cral Dominion, the Galactic Federation, and a small but vibrant blue region, Earth's claimed space. Seated at the high table was Chancellor Vorin of the Cral Dominion, his crimson scales gleaming under the light. His slitted golden eyes narrowed as Vance approached. General Vance, began the Arbiter, an ancient, translucent being of the Fin species. Its voice was soft but carried through the chamber. The Council has convened to mediate the conflict between humanity and the Cral Dominion. You have the floor to present your case. Vance stepped up to the podium. He paused, scanning the room. Hundreds of alien eyes stared back, some curious, some hostile, others unreadable. When the Cral Dominion attacked Earth, Vance began, his voice steady and cold, they didn't just attack a planet. They attacked our home. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, placing it on the podium. A hologram materialized above him, showing a city engulfed in flames. Alien ships rained fire down on helpless civilians. Screams echoed through the recording as a human child, her face smeared with ash, stumbled through the chaos before disappearing into rubble. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even the crowd delegation stiffened. This, Vance said, gesturing to the image, was New Chicago. Population, 8 million. They didn't stand a chance. Cral ships breached our defenses in less than an hour. They reduced our cities to ash and slaughtered our people. Without provocation, he turned to Chancellor Vorin. Tell me, Chancellor, what justification do you have for this? Vorin's voice was deep and guttural. Humanity expanded recklessly. Your colonies encroached upon our sacred territories. The Dominion acted to preserve its sovereignty. Vance slammed his fist on the podium, silencing the Chancellor. Don't you dare call this preservation. You launched an unprovoked attack on a species that had never even heard of your sacred territories. We weren't a threat. We were a target. A murmur of agreement rippled through parts of the chamber. Vance let it simmer before continuing. When Earth's defenses fell, we didn't beg for mercy. We didn't surrender. He straightened, his voice rising. We fought back, and we fought harder than you ever expected. The hologram shifted to footage of human ships, battered but relentless, engaging Cral fleets. Outnumbered and outgunned, Terran vessels used ingenious tactics, weaving through enemy fire and striking with precision. The final image froze on a Cral dreadnought, its hull torn apart by what appeared to be a suicide run from a Terran corvette. That's what humanity does, Vance said, his voice quieter but no less intense. We adapt, we endure, and when you come for us, we make you regret it. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the Arbiters seemed unsure how to proceed. Finally, Vorin broke the silence with a sneer. Your retaliation was excessive. Entire Dominion fleets were annihilated. Dozens of our worlds now lie in ruin. Is that what you call justice? Vance's expression hardened. Vance stepped away from the podium, pacing slowly. Justice would have been wiping your entire Dominion from existence. Justice would have been doing to you what you did to us. But we didn't, because humanity, for all its faults, values life. Even yours. He turned back to face Vorin directly. Don't mistake that for weakness. The Cral Chancellor opened his mouth to retort, but the Arbiter raised a translucent hand. Enough, it said. General Vance, what is it you seek from this council? What I seek, Vance replied, his voice ringing through the chamber, is acknowledgement. The Cral Dominion attacked Earth without provocation. They burned our cities, killed our people, and forced us into a war we didn't ask for. And now, they want to paint themselves as the victims. He pointed at Voron. No, you started this war, and you own that. The chamber erupted into noise. Some delegates argued in support of Vance, while others sided with the Cral. The Arbiter called for order, but the tension was palpable. Voron leaned forward, his voice a low growl. And if the Council does not grant you this acknowledgement, Vance didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his coat again and pulled out a small, charred Cral insignia. He tossed it onto the table in front of the Arbiter. Then you leave us no choice, he said, his tone lethal. We've fought this war alone so far, and we've done more than survive, we've won. But don't think for a second we'll let the Council sell us out to appease the Dominion. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room one last time. Humanity is done being underestimated. Without waiting for a response, Vance turned and walked out of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the stunned silence behind him as the Council erupted into chaos. The Council chamber remained in uproar long after General Elias Vance walked out. Delegates argued, some condemning the Cral, others cautioning against siding with humanity. The Arbiter called for order, but the tension hung thick. Chancellor Voron watched the chaos with narrowed eyes. He had underestimated the human general's ability to command. Vance had not come to plead. He had come to deliver a warning, and it had landed. Hours later, Vance stood alone in a private briefing room aboard the Council station, staring at the cold metal walls. The chamber was stark, just a table, a chair, and a single observation window overlooking the void. He knew he was being watched. The door slid open, and Ambassador Reeland of the Skell Confederacy entered. His sleek silver-blue exoskeleton caught the dim light. The Skell were one of the few species that had remained neutral throughout the war, but Vance knew that neutrality could shift. Reeland crossed his arms, clicking his mandibles. You made quite an impression, General. Vance didn't turn. Good. Reeland exhaled through his spiracles, a sound like shifting sand. You forced the Council to acknowledge the attack on Earth, but you also made enemies. The Dominion is rallying allies. Vance finally looked at him. Then they haven't learned their lesson. Reeland studied him for a long moment. Do you truly believe this war will end with words? Vance's jaw tightened. No, but it won't end with us on our knees, either. The door opened again. This time it was Voron. The Cral Chancellor's crimson cloak swayed as he entered, flanked by two towering guards in obsidian armor. Reeland straightened. Chancellor Voron ignored him. His gaze locked on Vance. Leave us. Reeland hesitated, then nodded and stepped out. The door sealed behind him. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Voron stepped closer, his golden eyes gleaming. You have won many battles, human, but do not mistake victory for dominance. Vance met his gaze without flinching. You're here, which means you're worried. Voron's nostrils flared, but he didn't deny it. He paced slowly. You fight like no species we have ever encountered. Your fleet should have fallen. Your colonies should have crumbled. And yet every time we struck, you adapted. You endured. He turned sharply. How? Vance folded his arms. Because you thought we'd break. You thought taking Earth would make us surrender. All it did was make us angry. Voron's claws curled slightly. You humans, you fight as if death means nothing. Vance exhaled through his nose. We fight because death means everything. He stepped forward, his voice cold. You didn't just bomb cities. You burned homes, families, children. And when we saw what you were willing to do, we decided there was only one answer. Make sure you could never do it again. Voron studied him. You believe yourself righteous. Vance's lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. No, we believe in survival. The Cral leader's jaw tightened. Your retaliation was severe. Vance's expression darkened. You invaded our world, Vance said, his voice steady. Did you expect us to just roll over and die? Vorin exhaled heavily, a mix of frustration and calculation in his expression. The Council will not allow this war to continue unchecked. They will seek resolution, and if you refuse their terms— Vance leaned in slightly. Then they'll learn something else about humanity. Vorin tilted his head. And what is that? Vance's voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. That we don't lose. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Vorin let out a slow breath. Perhaps, he admitted, we miscalculated. Vance didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Cral leader studied him one last time before turning and striding to the door. It slid open and he paused. You are unlike the others in this council, General Vance. Vance's voice was steady. And that's why we're still standing. The door sealed shut behind Vorin. Vance exhaled, his fist unclenching. He knew what this was. The Dominion was testing the waters, seeing if humanity would flinch. They wouldn't. Reeland's voice crackled over the intercom. You know he'll never admit they were wrong. Vance smirked. He doesn't have to. He just has to understand we aren't afraid of them anymore. Silence followed, then a quiet chuckle from Reeland. I think he understands that now. Vance stared out the observation window, the distant stars burning against the abyss. The war wasn't over, but it was no longer a war humanity was fighting to survive. Now, it was a war they intended to win. The Galactic Council reconvened the next day. The tension in the chamber was heavier than before. Delegates whispered in hushed voices, exchanging nervous glances. The war between humanity and the Cral Dominion had reached a boiling point, and the Council knew that whatever happened today would determine the fate of the galaxy. General Elias Vance walked into the chamber, his face unreadable. Unlike the day before, he was not alone. Two officers in crisp Terran uniforms flanked him. Admiral Sophia Raines of the Terran Navy and Director Alistair Keene of the Earth Defense Intelligence Division. Their presence was a message. Humanity wasn't just here to speak. They were here to deliver a verdict. At the central podium, Chancellor Vorin stood tall, his crimson scales catching the chamber's cold light. He appeared composed, but Vance could see the tension in his stance. The Dominion leader knew what was coming. The Arbiter's translucent form shimmered as it raised a hand. The Council acknowledges both parties. General Vance, you may proceed. Vance stepped forward, his voice firm. Yesterday, I asked for acknowledgement of what the Dominion did to Earth. Today, I give you humanity's final response. With a nod, Admiral Raines activated a holographic display. The chamber darkened as the image of a colossal fleet emerged, a vast armada of Terran warships, hundreds strong. Each vessel was sleek, angular, and armed to the teeth. The sheer size of the fleet sent a ripple of unease through the delegates. This, Raines said, her voice even, is the fleet we built while you debated over our survival. The display zoomed in on one particular ship, the indomitable, Earth's newest dreadnought. A behemoth that dwarfed even the largest Dominion warships. Its weapon systems pulsed with raw energy, and its hull gleamed like a blade forged for war. Vance let the image linger before speaking. You assumed we were weak. You assumed we would break. Instead, we adapted. We built. We prepared. Chancellor Vorin's claws tapped against the podium. You threatened war. Vance shook his head. No. You already brought us war. We're just showing you how it ends. The council chamber erupted into murmurs. Some species had supported the Dominion, believing humanity would eventually fold. Seeing this armada shattered that illusion, Director Keene stepped forward. For 2 years, the Cral waged a war to exterminate us. In response, we studied them, their strategies, their weaknesses. The Dominion thought they understood human warfare. He glanced at Voron. You don't. Voron's golden eyes flicked to the hologram before settling back on Vance. Even with this fleet, you cannot defeat the entire Dominion. Vance smirked. You sure? Rains changed the display. A new image appeared. Destroyed Dominion shipyards, shattered battle stations, planets once held by the Cral now under human control. Each was marked with a timestamp. They weren't future plans. They had already happened. The Chancellor's breath hitched. Keen's voice was like ice. Your war machine is collapsing. You just don't know it yet. Voron's expression hardened, but he said nothing. Vance took a step closer. You wanted a fight, and we gave you one. But we've had enough. This war ends one of two ways. He raised a single finger. One, you acknowledge what you did. Withdraw from every human system, and accept that Earth is not yours to take. His finger curled into a fist. Two, you refuse, and we finish what you started. Silence choked the room. The implications were clear. Humanity wasn't offering peace. They were offering a choice. Surrender or be destroyed. The Arbiter finally spoke. Chancellor, how does the Dominion respond? Voron's eyes flickered with rage, but also something else. Understanding. His forces were bleeding, his empire fracturing. The Dominion had started this war with arrogance. Now, they faced an enemy who had refused to die. The Chancellor's claws tightened against the podium. Then, with a slow, controlled breath, he spoke. The Cral Dominion acknowledges the attack on Earth. Gasps filled the chamber. Even the Arbiter looked surprised. Voron's voice was measured, but the strain was evident. We will withdraw from all human-claimed systems and cease hostilities. His gaze locked onto Vance. But know this, General. Your kind is dangerous. And one day, this council will realize it. Vance's lips pressed into a thin line. Then they'll learn what you did. That when humanity is attacked, we don't fall. He let the words hang. We rise. The Arbiter raised its hand. Then the war between Earth and the Dominion is concluded. This council is adjourned. The chamber erupted into a storm of voices. Some called it a historic moment. Others murmured of fear. Humanity had not just survived. They had proven they were a force no one could ignore. Vance turned, walking out of the chamber with his officers. As they stepped onto the station's observation deck, Earth's distant blue glow was visible among the stars. Rains exhaled. It's over. Keen shook his head. No, it's just begun. Vance stared at the endless expanse beyond. Today, humanity had won. Tomorrow, the galaxy would remember why they should never be underestimated again. The war was over, but the battle for the future had just begun.